في عنده الهدف أنا برأيي هو سحب المواد الكيميائية التي تنتج غاز كيميائي خطير جدا وغاز بيولوجي جرثومي من نديم باروش. نحن فكرنا انه نأذيهم بنسائهم واولادهم. بيطلع لك واحد بيقول لك ليش بيجوز تقتل نساء واطفال؟ قال فمن اعتدى عليكم فاعتدوا عليه بمثل ما اعتدى. نقتل نساءهم واطفالهم كما قال الشيخ أسامة بن لادن رحمه الله حتى يكفوا عن قتل نسائنا واطفالنا. نقتل نساءهم واطفالهم كما يقتلون نساءنا واطفالنا حتى يكفوا عن قتل نسائنا واطفالنا. الفكرة هون اجت. فكرة هذا البيان من كم يوم حاولوا اقتحام الجبل، والذي يعرف يعرف والذي لا يعرف يقول كيف على سبيل كلام ما نستطيع نتكلم. ابتعينا مع اخواننا انه هذا السلاح الفعال الرادع الفتاك الذي عندنا ان نستعمله في الردع. قلنا في البيان انه اذا قرب متر واحد، ما عم نقول نحن ننظر، اذا قرب متر واحد فما عاد في مجال، لانه كل شيء وقت مباح. اذا قرب متر واحد نحن سنضربهم في عقيراتهم باذن الله عز وجل، باذن الله عز وجل، وسنجعل صبحهم ليلا وليلهم صبحا باذن الله عز وجل.
Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. Today is September 6th, Friday, 2013. I'm ready to go here. You just saw a video. It says proof that they use chemical weapons, the rebels, but I think at GGN here I've pretty much shown all the evidence that points towards the rebels using chemical weapons, being trained by the West to use them, to handle them. So all the mainstream media news just using what they have, along with a different version. So, basically Iran's version, Lebanon's version, and of course Russia, but also alternative media news too. So I'm going to move on here, and I'm not going to cover all of just Syria today. I'll cover the next two videos, different stuff, the economy, police state, and all kinds of crazy stuff. Yes, the Syrian rebels do have access to chemical weapons. One of the U.S. government's main justifications for its claim that the Syrian government carried out the chemical weapons attack is that the rebels don't have chemical weapons. However, there's lines of evidence that show that the rebels do have these weapons. This is from last December, a Washington Post article, potential looting of Syrian weapons. The officials in the U.S. are increasingly worried that Syria's weapons of mass destruction could fall in the hands of Islamist extremists, rogue generals, or other uncontrollable factions. Last week, fighters from the group that the Obama regime has branded a terrorist organization were among rebels who seized the Sheikh Suleiman's military base near Aleppo, where research on chemical weapons had been conducted. Rebels are also closing in, or were closing in, another base in Aleppo, Sifara, which had been served as a major production center for such munitions. And you have to remember too, these are kind of improvised chemical weapons. They're not weapons of mass destruction, which is probably what they were working on. These are more of a chlorine and something else mix concoction. So it says here that it's almost inevitable, says a retired Army officer. It may have already happened for what we know. But the same looting of these chemical weapons took place in Libya as well. He said there was actually some sarin gas that was unaccounted for, this representative from Michigan had told Fox. Russia has compiled a 100-page report blaming Syrian rebels for chemical weapons attack. This is from McClatchy, so pretty mainstream. Russia says it's compiled a 100-page report detailing what it says is evidence the Syrian rebels, not forces loyal to Assad, were behind the deadly sarin gas attack in Aleppo suburb earlier this year. So this is not the one that everyone's making a big hype about. And also, what's worth noting is that the one that happened before was actually taken on video. You can see people put on stretchers, and and whatnot. It was supposedly from the government, the Syrian government, TV and that. But this latest one, there's even been stuff out there saying that the whole thing was a hoax, it was a fraud, it never even took place. So, but moving on here, U.S. plans Syria or Syrian civilian catastrophe since 2007. NBC's news report says the great tragedy of the century, more than 2 million refugees forced out of Syria. So they poured into neighboring countries as refugees. Around 5,000 people per day were fleeing the 3-year conflict. It says it claimed 100,000 lives. Syria has become the great tragedy of the century, a disgraceful humanitarian calamity with suffering and displacement unparalleled in recent history. And again, this is all due to Western intervention during the original Arab Spring back in, 2011? But even though the UN and the West feigned shock over the growing humanitarian catastrophe unfolding, they said the goal of a violent sectarian conflict and its predictable catastrophic results, along with calls to literally bleed Syria, remember that term, bleed Syria, have been the underlying strategy of special interests in the U.S., Israel, Saudi Arabia, and their regional Gulf partners since at least 2007. And you type in that headline, you go in and check out the article from Land Destroyer, it's pretty good. But as far as the Arab Spring goes, it says in reality, pro-democracy protesters served as tenuous smokescreens behind which armed, foreign-backed extremists took to the streets and countrysides of Syria to execute a sectarian bloodbath years in the making. So, yeah, you actually have what, in 2001, classified plots revealed by U.S. General Wesley Clark that the U.S. plans to attack and destroy the governments of 7 nations, including Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. And let's not forget our little Brookings Institute published report titled Which Path to Persia, talking about Iran. So the U.S. government has actually budgeted $50 million in the last 2 years to develop technologies to help activists protect themselves from arrest and prosecution. The report went on to admit that the U.S. Organized training sessions for 5,000 activists in different parts of the world held in basically Tunisia, Egypt, Syria, and Lebanon. We're seeing all this protesting, right? Hands off Syria. To me, I'm a little skeptical about this whole hands off Syria campaign. I'll get into that after this, but Syrian woman pleads to McCain, I beg you not to attack, in a town hall meeting in Arizona. Says she can trace her history to the pre-Christian days of the region. So, we cannot afford to turn Syria into another Iraq or Afghanistan. The woman who identified herself as whatever. I beg you, my family is there. There's so many good Syrians. The majority of the people want to save their country. And you also need to listen to the majority of the American people who do not want you to go there. So pretty interesting. She says that to listen to you say that there is no good option in Syria, I refuse to believe that. The good option right now is to take Saudi Arabia, of course Qatar and UAE, and Iran, and force them to stop supporting two sides in Syria, and you could do it. You could do it by diplomacy, not bombs, Senator McCain. What happened to the anti-war movement a mere 72 hours after President Obama delivered an basically a speech honoring the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, announced his intention to pound yet another country with bombs? The oxymoron last week was noteworthy for how little attention it received. It says, yes, a president memorialized an anti-war activist who derided the U.S. government as the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. Then the same president quickly proposed yet more violence, this time against Syria. So it says here, in the anti-war movement that was so vigorously opposed the last war is largely silent. It says there have been a few emails from liberal groups, but there seems to be little prospect for mass protests, raising questions about whether an anti-war movement even exists anymore. And, my quick opinion is that what it really does kind of irritate me. I mean, it's great to see people out in full, in semi-full force and saying that they don't favor any kind of invasion or intervention. But the problem is that, I've been covering Syria for how long now? Since the beginning, especially in the last 8 months, really hardcore. And I want to know, where the hell were all these people before, when we were supporting Al-Qaeda to do what was being done, including chemical attacks and massacring of not just, basically civilians. I mean, there was execution style of 40 different people, sectarian type stuff going on. Nobody said anything. Kidnapping of journalists, whole towns, siege, blowing up all kinds of mosques and churches. Just real war crimes. And like I said, this is all covered in mainstream media and for the West, but also for the East. So you can find all this information openly. It's not any kind of hidden conspiracy theory that the West is arming terrorists and is siding with Al Qaeda, the same people who they went over to Iraq to fight against, right, in Afghanistan. So these people, talking about intervention, we've already been intervening. Video shows Syrian rebels mass executing 7 prisoners. So says the prisoners, 7 in all, were captured Syrian soldiers. 5 were trussed, their backs marked with red welts. They kept their faces pressed to the dirt as rebel commanders recited a bitter revolutionary verse. So he says for 50 years they were companions to corruption. And you look at the actual headline of the New York Times, it says brutality of Syrian rebels posing dilemma in West. So see how they water down those headlines instead of just saying whatever the hell it really is, which is, yeah, the allies of the United States, these terrorists in Syria, are executing people. So it kind of poses a kind of a moral. These rebels pound Christian villages as siege continues from captured hotel. Rebels shell neighborhoods. It says they're firing mortars at the village as other fighters roam the streets on foot, attacking Syrian military forces that have been sent to try to oust them. Al-Qaeda has accused the Syrian Christian minority of being pro-Assad, though as a practical matter they are simply averse to the Islamist-dominated rebels that are constantly attacking them. U.S. considers training Syrian militants. Again, this is laughable to me. The Obama regime is considering a plan to use U.S. military trainers to help increase the capabilities of the terrorists. So any training would take place outside Syria. One possible location would be Jordan. So this is the thing. They're already doing it, right? Before the chemical attack, reports were saying that U.S.-led rebels were sent into Syria before a chemical attack, including trained by American, Israeli, and Jordanian commanders, entered Syria from Jordan. So there you go. I mean, we've already done this. Putin says Syria chemical attack is rebels' provocation in hope of intervention. He says a provocation carried out by the rebels to attract foreign-led strikes. So I don't know what's going on in Russia. I think this whole thing is just a kind of a game being played out, a dangerous game. But for whatever it's worth, you got to pick up where you can. There are different news, and this is what it was, of course, to bring them in. That part is definitely true because they were losing, right? The Western-backed rebels were losing. Pentagon knew and it needed help. They needed their allies, the U.S. Pentagon knew in 2012 that it would take 75,000 ground troops to secure Syria's chemical weapon facilities. So it looks like we're going to end up having to do 2 videos here because I'm already at 13-minute mark. So this is the way it works. The estimate comes from a secret memorandum from the U.S. Department of Defense prepared for President Obama in early 2012. And it said this was long before the U.S. confirmed about the using of chemical weapons. They said here they'd known for a full year that resolving Syria's chemical weapons threat without ground troops was a practical impossibility. Of course, you had John Kerry saying there would be no boots on the ground. Less than a week later, he actually said, actually, there could be boots on the ground. U.S. planned significantly larger strike on Syria. So I said, why all of a sudden is Obama going to Congress? Well, besides to legitimize the what they call democratic process, the system itself, to bring legitimacy when it doesn't really have any, is to what? Is to actually have a wider war, which is beyond the War Powers Act, which says 90 days, then you have to go to Congress. So this is why he's going. And it does make sense, this whole top-down, hands-off Syria protest. That will be used, kind of like the South Park episode about having your cake and eat it too, about how America was built, so you can go to war and protest against it at the same time. And it's pure hypocrisy. And so they're probably going to push this attack forward. So they're going to get what they want. But see, everybody is protesting it, so it means that it's okay. I don't know. I guess we'll see. But AIPAC and the Zionists are pushing pretty hard for this. But General Martin Dempsey warns the U.S. Not to strike Syria, saying that they're not ready. And McCain responded that Dempsey's warnings are disingenuous. Arab countries ready to pay billions for the U.S. military strike on Syria, talking about the Gulf countries like Qatar. They've already been paying billions, basically, for this intervention. The White House is using taxpayer money to launch a Syria pro-attack Syria website. So funny, he starts off by saying, our intelligence shows. Well, that's Israeli intelligence, so there you go. That pretty much says everything. This is GGN. Join me in part 2. Thank you.